Chinatown is the kind of movie that makes you feel like you've been punched in the soul by a guy in a linen suit. It's a noir mystery where everyone's lying, the water's poisoned, and the only thing more corrupt than the city is the smile on Jack Nicholson's face. So put on your best fedora, squint into the smog, and prepare for 20 weird, bleak facts about Chinatown. Number 1. That bandage was not just for show. So, here's the deal with Jack Nicholson's famous nose bandage in Chinatown. It wasn't just a clever bit of costuming, it was the result of a stunt that went sideways. The knife used in the scene was a prop that was supposed to fold back on itself and release a little blood capsule when it hit him. Pretty neat in theory, unless you flicked it the wrong way, at which point it basically turned into an actual weapon. During one take, Polanski, who insisted on playing the thug himself because why not, jabbed Nicholson a little too close and actually nicked him. Nicholson really bled, everyone freaked out, and Polanski decided that was good enough. Print it. From then on, the bandage wasn't a costume choice, it was covering a real injury, and Nicholson had to swap it out twice a day because he sweated through them during filming. Eventually, he and Polanski got tired of explaining the whole tricky prop knife story and just told people, yeah, it was a real cut. Easier than a lecture on stage combat safety. And honestly, it made for a better Hollywood myth. Number 2. A noir with some real history behind it. On the surface, Chinatown looks like your standard private eye noir, but the story actually draws from some very real history. It's inspired by the Los Angeles water wars, when the city's leaders more or less played Monopoly with rivers and reservoirs. The character Hollis Mulwray was loosely modeled on William Mulholland, the guy who basically decided who got water in LA, which in turn meant who got rich. If the name sounds familiar, that's because he got a whole road named after him, Mulholland Drive. So yeah, while Nicholson was bleeding on camera, the bigger story behind the film was about how people in power bled the land dry. Number 3. Faye Dunaway versus Roman Polanski and the cup nobody forgot. The working relationship between Faye Dunaway and Roman Polanski was about as friendly as a porcupine hug. Dunaway later described his approach as non-stop cruelty and nitpicking, and things eventually reached a boiling point during a car scene. Polanski, being the perfectionist he was, kept demanding take after take, and when Dunaway asked for a bathroom break, he refused because apparently bladder control was part of method acting. Finally, at her limit, she grabbed a paper cup, handled her business right there, and when Polanski leaned in with yet another note, she tossed the contents straight in his face. The crew, depending on who you ask, either gasped in horror or quietly applauded. The next day, some even showed up wearing joke t-shirts reading, "I survived the whiz raid." Dunaway has since brushed the whole thing off as a ridiculous rumor, but the story stuck anyway. Whether true or not, it perfectly sums up the atmosphere on set. Creative genius on one side, complete chaos on the other, with everyone else just trying not to get caught in the splash zone. Number 4. That knife guy? Yep, that's Polanski. If you've ever wondered who slices Jack Nicholson's nose in Chinatown, the answer is Roman Polanski himself. He didn't hand the role off to a stunt guy or an extra. Nope. He cast himself as the man with knife, partly as a nod to Hitchcock-style cameos, but mostly so he could micromanage one of the film's most important moments without anyone slowing him down. He wanted the scene to feel raw and dangerous, and judging by the fact that Nicholson actually ended up bleeding, mission accomplished. The whole thing was made even more uncomfortable by the fact that Nicholson and Polanski weren't exactly best pals at the time. Nicholson's jab, "Where'd you get the midget?" wasn't just a line from the script. It carried a little extra bite aimed at Polanski. So when you watch that scene, you're not just seeing movie violence, you're also catching a glimpse of the very real tension simmering behind the camera. Number 5. 2 hours of lights. One tiny reflection. Polanski had a reputation for being obsessed with details, and one of his favorite battles was over a shot of Faye Dunaway's eye. He wanted Jack Nicholson's worried face reflected perfectly in her pupil. Not almost perfect, not close enough, but crystal clear. To get it, the crew spent 2 solid hours moving a massive 2K light around in tiny increments, basically playing the most stressful game of optical Jenga ever invented. Meanwhile, Dunaway had to sit absolutely still with her head clamped in place, blinking only when Polanski called, "Cut." Imagine being told that even your eyeball needs to hit its mark. By the time Nicholson's reflection finally showed up sharp on the film, the crew broke into applause, partly because they admired the artistry, and partly because their retinas were fried from staring into a spotlight for 2 hours straight. Number 6. Turning Down Gatsby, cashing in on Chinatown. Producer Robert Evans originally wanted Robert Towne to adapt The Great Gatsby and was willing to pay him $175,000 for the job, a pretty sweet deal at the time. Towne, though, didn't think he could do Fitzgerald justice, and rather than write a disappointing script for a masterpiece novel, he asked if he could take a swing at his own idea instead. Evans agreed, but the paycheck dropped from $175,000 to $25,000. That own idea turned into Chinatown. So yeah, Towne left about $150,000 on the table but walked away with one of the most iconic screenplays ever written. It's one of those rare moments in Hollywood where artistic integrity actually paid off, though probably not in the way Towne's accountant would have preferred. Number 7. Chinatown doesn't even show up until the end. Here's a fun bit of trivia. In Robert Towne's original draft, the word Chinatown doesn't appear in the first 120 pages. That's because it wasn't meant to be a literal place at all. It was more of a metaphor, a mental space where nothing good could ever happen, and where Jake Gittes had already been burned once as a cop. Towne's draft ran 187 pages, which is basically the screenwriting equivalent of a Tolstoy novel, and not a single scene actually took place in Chinatown. It was Polanski who stepped in and said, "Yeah, but the audience needs an actual Chinatown to drive the point home." He pushed for the climax to happen there, giving the story a literal, gut-punch ending. Towne fought it at first, but that one tweak turned a vague metaphor into one of the bleakest, most unforgettable final scenes in movie history. Sometimes killing your darlings is what makes a classic, though in this case it also meant killing off your script's geography lesson. Number 8. Towne wanted justice. Polanski wanted misery. Towne's original ending for Chinatown was almost optimistic by comparison. In his version, Evelyn Mulwray shoots and kills her monstrous father, Noah Cross. She'd end up in prison, sure, but at least the bad guy would be dead and justice would feel, well, sort of served. Polanski hated that idea. Still reeling from the real-life trauma of his wife Sharon Tate's murder, he argued that the world isn't neat and tidy and that sometimes evil wins just because it can. So he rewrote the ending himself in a single day, flipping everything on its head. Evelyn dies, Cross walks away untouched, and Gittes is left helpless. Towne was furious. Imagine spending months crafting your ending only to have the director rewrite it in one sitting, but eventually admitted that Polanski's bleaker take was the right call. It's the difference between a good movie and one that scars you in all the right ways. Number 9. Jack Nicholson vs. Roman Polanski, featuring one very unlucky TV. Jack Nicholson was a hardcore Lakers fan, which sounds harmless enough, except he had a habit of holding up filming so he could catch game highlights on a little portable TV in his trailer. Roman Polanski, who already thought Jack wasn't taking the production seriously, eventually lost it. One day he stormed over, grabbed a wooden mop from the props department, and smashed Nicholson's television like it was a piñata full of bad decisions. Then, with perfect deadpan, he handed the broken handle back to the props guy and told everyone to get back to work. Filming continued in stunned silence, and Nicholson, wisely, never brought another TV to set. Sometimes directors yell, sometimes they throw scripts, and sometimes they just straight up commit appliance homicide. Number 10. Faye Dunaway versus the stray hair and the eyebrow incident. Faye Dunaway's clashes with Polanski were almost as famous as the movie itself. At one point, Polanski spotted a single stray hair catching the light and, without saying a word, reached out and plucked it from her head. Dunaway erupted, stormed off, and shut down production for hours. On another day, after Polanski criticized the way she was arching her eyebrows, yes, really, she walked off the lot entirely, jumped in her Mustang, and disappeared for 4 hours. Where did she go? To the beach, with a paperback, because sometimes you just need sand and a cheap novel to survive Roman Polanski. Back on set, insurance agents were losing their minds. The day's schedule was toast, and producer Robert Evans eventually had to bribe her back with a bigger trailer and her own private makeup artist. It worked, but only barely, proving that on Chinatown, even a single eyebrow could derail the entire shoot. All right, we're only halfway through, and if you're still with me, you deserve a medal, or at least a like. If you're enjoying these wild behind-the-scenes stories, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, the next half of these facts gets even messier. Number 11. The famous last line was basically a placeholder. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown, one of the most quoted lines in movie history, and it almost didn't exist. Screenwriter Robert Towne only put it in as a placeholder, something he figured he'd replace later with a line that sounded a little more profound. Roman Polanski, though, thought it was perfect. Short, weary, and cynical, the verbal equivalent of a shrug. To him, it nailed the whole theme of the movie. Sometimes corruption is so baked into the system that there's no fixing it, you just walk away. The editors hated it, thinking it was too casual and maybe even a little too on the nose, no pun intended. But when test audiences heard it, they cheered, and that was that. The temporary line stayed, and history got one of its most iconic mic drop endings thanks to what was basically a rough draft note. Number 12. Jack Nicholson was dating his co-star's daughter. The scenes between Jake Giddes, Jack Nicholson, and Noah Cross, John Huston, were already deeply unsettling, but behind the camera, there was an extra layer of awkwardness. Nicholson had just started dating Huston's real-life daughter, Angelica. She visited the set often, which meant that while Huston was playing a father obsessed with his own daughter, Nicholson was actually dating his. Hollywood, never a dull moment. The tension came to a head during the infamous scene where Huston's character asks Nicholson's Giddes, "Do you sleep with my daughter?" The line was meant to be sinister, but given the real-life situation, it hit with a different kind of sting. Nicholson later joked that if he ever looked genuinely terrified in those scenes, it wasn't Huston that scared him. It was picturing producer Robert Evans' face instead. Sometimes gallows humor is the only way to get through a shoot. Number 13. Curly almost had a straight razor. In the finished film, Burt Young's Curly comes across as a big sad-eyed guy who hires Jake Giddes to tail his cheating wife. But in Robert Towne's early draft, Curly was a whole lot darker. Instead of showing up heartbroken, he barged into Jake's office with a straight razor and threatened to kill his wife. At one point, Giddes even tells him, "You're not rich enough to get away with murder," which is a great line, but maybe a little heavy for the first act. Test audiences weren't buying it. They thought Curly was so intense that it distracted from the film's actual villain, Noah Cross. So the script got revised, and Curly was softened into the well-meaning sad sack we know today. In hindsight, it was the right call. One unhinged guy waving a razor around is plenty. But in Chinatown, you save the real nightmare fuel for the man with all the power. Number 14. The slaps were real, and they hurt. The scene where Giddes slaps Evelyn into revealing the truth is one of the most brutal moments in the movie, and it's brutal in part because Polanski wouldn't settle for fake stage slaps. After take of Nicholson pulling his punches, Polanski finally told him, "Hit her like you mean it." Dunaway, fed up herself, basically gave Jack the green light. "Go ahead and actually slap me." Nicholson did, reluctantly, and the take you see in the film shows the real sting of those hits. Makeup artists had to dab on extra color to simulate bruises between takes, but the emotion you see on Dunaway's face isn't an illusion. It's genuine anger and pain. She later said the performance came from a very real cost, which explains why the scene still makes people shift uncomfortably in their seats. Sometimes movie magic isn't really magic at all, it's just pain caught on film. Number 15. Filming under the code. Name: A Gopher's Last Gasp. Like a lot of productions, Chinatown didn't shoot under its real name. Instead, the crew used the fake working title, A Gopher's Last Gasp, which sounds less like a hard-boiled noir and more like a rejected Looney Tunes short. The idea was to throw off nosy journalists and keep Paramount execs from panicking about a movie that revolved around water rights. not exactly a sexy pitch. The title wasn't very convincing to anyone who actually worked on the lot, but it was just odd enough to keep casual snoops at bay. Sometimes the best disguise is pure nonsense. And in this case, a dying gopher gave the production the breathing room it needed. Number 16. When Fiction Meets the California Water Wars. Robert Towne's screenplay may feel like pure noir invention, but at its core, it's ripped right out of Los Angeles history. The whole water subplot was inspired by the real California water wars of the early 1900s, when the city siphoned water from the Owens Valley to fuel its explosive growth. Behind it all was William Mulholland, the powerful engineer of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Mulholland was brilliant, ruthless, and not above bribing entire city councils to get what he wanted. His aqueduct project devastated rural communities while turning Los Angeles into the empire it wanted to be. In the script, Towne simply swapped Mulholland for Mulray and added Noah Cross to crank the corruption dial up to noir levels. History was already messy. Towne just made it cinematic. Number 17. The Bandage That Kept Growing. As the shoot went on, Jack Nicholson's real nose injury started to heal, which meant the makeup team wanted to gradually scale back the size of the bandage. Makes sense, right? But Polanski wasn't having it. He decided the opposite would be more effective, that the bandage should actually get bigger and bulkier as the film went along, like Jake Giddes was losing a fight with his own face. By the time we reach the finale, Nicholson is wearing a bandage so thick he basically looks like he's just headbutted a Buick. Strangely, audiences didn't question it at all. Turns out if the story has you hooked, you'll accept any continuity issue, even a bandage that grows like it's been fertilized. Number 18. Dunaway's Eyeliner, a 1930s time capsule. Faye Dunaway's look in Chinatown feels timeless, but it wasn't designed out of thin air. Her eyeliner style actually came straight from a 1932 Max Factor catalog, giving Evelyn Mulray that perfect mix of period glamour and slightly old-fashioned elegance. The idea was to anchor her firmly in the 1930s, not in the middle of a 1970s fashion spread. And Dunaway didn't just sit back while a makeup artist handled it, she insisted on doing it herself. Every morning, she spent about 45 minutes carefully applying the eyeliner with a thin paintbrush and a magnifying mirror. That level of effort definitely paid off. Her eyes became such a defining part of Evelyn's character that they feel almost like another plot device, second only to the water supply. Number 19. The Mop and the TV Make a Comeback. When Jack Nicholson finally directed The Two Jakes in 1990, he couldn't resist slipping in a tiny nod to the chaos of the original shoot. The opening scene shows a mop handle smashing a television inside a pawn shop, a wink to the infamous moment when Roman Polanski destroyed Nicholson's portable TV back on the Chinatown set. Most viewers would probably miss it, but for anyone who knew the backstory, it's a subtle, darkly funny acknowledgement that some on-set grudges stick around longer than a bandage on a healing nose. Number 20. A happy trumpet almost ruined the ending. The bleak, haunting finale of Chinatown almost went in a very different direction. Philip Lambro, the original composer, wrote a full score, including a cheery Dixieland-style trumpet cue for the final pullback shot over all the tragedy. Test audiences, however, were not impressed. In fact, they reportedly called it terrible. Lambro and his score were promptly scrapped, and Jerry Goldsmith was brought in to write the replacement in just 10 days. Polanski, after hearing the new score, decided that for the ending, silence spoke louder than any note. He told the orchestra, "Silence is the only music evil needs," and cut to black. That choice, no trumpet, no flourish, just the weight of the scene itself, is one of the most chilling and effective moments in film history. Sometimes the absence of music says more than anything could. And a bonus fact, the screenplay is considered a perfect blueprint. Robert Towne's Chinatown script isn't just a movie script, it's basically the holy grail of screenwriting. For decades, it's been the go-to example in writing courses and textbooks, especially in Sid Field's classic screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting. Writers and students study it obsessively because every scene, every line of dialogue, every tiny beat is perfectly calculated. It's often held up as the perfect model of three-act structure, character arcs, and plot pacing. Aspiring screenwriters treat it like a blueprint. If you can internalize Chinatown, you've got a masterclass in storytelling tucked under your belt. Though sadly, it won't teach you how to survive a director smashing your TV or throwing a mop at you. So, which of these facts blew your mind the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you loved the chaos, hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss the next dive into movie mayhem.
Wow, that was weird.